What's up, fam? Smash the like button for the algorithm and let's get started with the story. Watching the workers cut down the forest, the father said to his son, "Tell me, son, what do you think is the most important character trait in every person?" Hearing such a sudden question from his father, the son was surprised and wondered why he was asking such questions. Having received an answer to his question, the man folded his arms to his sides and smiled, saying, "That's a good answer." To which his son replied with a grudging smile, "What would be a good answer?" Hearing the discontent in his son's words, Lord Leo Richard Felina confidently spoke, "The main thing is a good heart." Hearing such a strange answer from his father, the son said in surprise that he was sorry, to which his father added that to a large extent, the virtues of a lord should depend on character. This applies to your friends as well as your family, and from time to time, even with thieves. You will have to use each of these roles, and in whatever situation you find yourself, you have to give it your all. You will definitely be able to create a connection with everyone around you. After listening to his father's instructions, the son just sighed heavily. The next moment, not far from him, Lord Leo Richard Felina heard someone's voice calling out, "He, sir!" Approaching his lord, the subject, breathing heavily after the cross-country run, said, "I am sorry to interrupt your conversation, but may I ask you the same thing, if it does not bother you?" To which the lord replied, "Of course, Charles." Hearing the request from the worker, Richard Felina stepped forward a little and said, "Simon, move back a little. Charles, you too." As soon as everyone moved to a safe distance, Lord Leo Richard Felina began to recite his spell to summon the dead. A few seconds later, skeletons appeared from his magic circle. As soon as the ritual was over, the skeletons immediately went to Charles with a request. With an awkward smile, Charles pointed to the logs behind the shed that needed to be moved. Having received the task, the skeletons immediately set to work and began to haul logs. Having received help from his lord, Charles joyfully exclaimed, "Thank you very much, sir." To which he joyfully replied, Yes, keep up the good work." At the same time, looking at his father, the son mentally noted, he created an additional workforce using the dead. What a great necromancer he is. After all, necromancers are special magicians who are able to use forbidden black magic. A long time ago, to get rid of the influence of necromancers, the ruler of the Thalhar Empire sent 50,000 soldiers in response to an attack by the enemy. The rulers of Kizan sent 10 necromancers to counteract them and hold back this gigantic army. There were only 10 necromancers, but soon all 50,000 soldiers were turned into the dead, and they left absolutely nothing of the Thal Empire. The result of this campaign, known as the so-called Roses Team, was the surrender of the Thal Empire, and as a result of a reckless attack, the rotting corpse of the emperor met his miserable end sitting on the throne of a fallen empire. This is how the era of the necromancers began, during which they were able to capture half the continent. However, another force that interfered with the necromancers' rule and dominated the other half of the continent was the humans. Priests were the only rivals of necromancers, who used the divine power granted to them for serving the goddess Dave. As Simon watched the summoned skeletons help the workers with their duties, he thought to himself, "They did a pretty good job, but it had nothing to do with feudal law." Lord Leo Richard Felina's town was located somewhere almost at the very edge of the map. It was a small town, even the villages nearby did not know about it. "And I am Simon Felina, a descendant of the ruler of these lands." After spending some time with his father, the boy returned home and said, "I'm home." Hearing the voice of her son, Anna Felina, who was Simon's mother, happily said, "Simon, you're back." To which he replied, "Yes, I was helping with the reports." Hearing that he was helping his father with his work, Simon's mother said, "Wow, you must be hungry." "Wait a bit." When he approached his mother and looked at what she was cooking, the boy asked in surprise, "What is it?" She replied that it was a broth infused with lahara mushrooms. When he heard what the food was made of, the boy was disappointed and said, "But they're poisonous, Mom." To which she confidently replied, "Yes, but don't worry, your mother made them edible." Then she used divine magic to purify the food from all the bad things. Watching the process of purifying the food from poison, Simon mentally said a blessing. "My mother was a priestess in the past. Every time I see her strength in action, I wonder how my mom and dad met. They are so different." The next moment the boy heard, "Simon, still looking at the mushrooms, why don't you sit down and have a bite to eat?" He replied, "Oh, sure." Approaching the table, the boy saw many different dishes prepared by his mother. Having tasted the food, Simon put the spoon aside and saw his mother nervously ask, "You ate so little today, do you have a pain, or are you suddenly ill?" After a snack, he took a bath and went to his room, where he witnessed his parents still tenderly touching each other. He mentally noted that they were still on their honeymoon. Noticing that their son was heading to his room, his mother said, "Good night, Simon." He said, "Good night to you as well." As soon as he entered his room, a letter flew into his face. Taking the parcel off his face and picking it up, the guy asked what it was in surprise, trying to figure out what had just happened. Simon added that the next moment he looked up at his window and saw a beautiful girl. As soon as he noticed her, she smiled happily and said, "Well, hello?" Ignoring the girl, the boy put the letter on the table and went to bed. Seeing this reaction, the girl angrily exclaimed, "Hey! Don't pretend you don't see me!" Trying to draw attention to herself, the girl tugged at the blanket off Simon, who added offensively, "Hey, I know you can see me! Get up now!" Resigned to the fact that he could not simply ignore her, Simon got up from the bed and said, "Good Lord! Who are you? How did you get here? Are you lost?" To which the girl replied, "I'm not lost, silly." Pointing her finger at the guy, the girl confidently added, "I'm here to meet you, Simon Felina." When Simon heard that he had just been approached, he nervously exclaimed, "How do you know my name?" To which the girl replied, "With a letter." The next moment, his parents came running to his cry, with a rolling pin and a frying pan, nervously exclaiming to Simon, "What is happening?" Seeing the boy's parents, the girl happily exclaimed, "That Richard was Anna." To which they surprisingly replied, "Nepos." Starting to toss the guest joyfully, her father exclaimed, "Oh my God! You haven't changed a bit." And Nepos replied, "I missed you so much." Anna added, "We missed you too." Simon said, "Mom, Dad," in surprise. After greeting his longtime friend, his father pointed to Nepos and said, "Simon, introduce yourself to her." By all means, this is the legendary Nepos Archbold. When Simon heard who was standing in front of him, he nervously said that it was Nepos Archbold, drenched in cold sweat from nervousness. The guy added that this could not be the same Nepos Archbold who turned Emperor Thaler into a weak-willed puppet, a witch who had been living for 300 years. When the arresting officer realized who was standing in front of him, the girl confidently said, "Yes, I am the same Nepos Archbold from Kaizen." After realizing his situation, the guy opened the letter and nervously said in his head, "What does this letter mean? Or could it be?" After which the girl said, "Let me make an official offer to Simon Felina." Having unsealed the letter that was brought to him, Simon read a letter from the Kaizen administration to Simon Fi. When she saw that he had read the letter, she stretched out her hand and said, "Come with me to Kaizen." Without waiting for an answer, she reached out the window and shouted, "Goodbye. Well, I'll see you in Kaizen." As soon as Nepos Archbold left their home, Simon's father said, "Simon, let me see the letter." When the son heard his father's request, he held it out and said, "Oh yes, take it." After reviewing the contents of the letter, the father read, "Simon Felina was enrolled on special terms." To which the son replied to his father that she would expect the same in Kaizen. Interrupting his son, the father said confidently, "Yes, this city is home to the Necromantic Elite and the Dark Alliance, and it is also home to the School for Necromancers, Nepos, with whom you just met, the chancellor of that school." Remembering the girl and her behavior, Simon was surprised to hear that she was a chancellor. His father confidently replied that she looked just like her. After his father's answer, Simon asked, "Okay, let's go. By the way, where is this Kaizen? Far from here?" To which his father thoughtfully replied, "It's very far away. It's located on the island of Arok. You have to take a ship in Langaran, the capital of the kingdom, and travel quite a long way to the island." The next moment, putting his hand on his son's shoulder, Richard added confidently, "But don't worry, Simon, there are plenty of things to do in Langaran, and the island of Arok is not a boring place." To top it all off, Kaizen is famous for its stylish uniforms. When Simon heard this, he was surprised to hear that it was a uniform. Joining the conversation between father and son, Anna said, "Well, in that case, you'll be very busy until the enrollment ceremony." Hearing this, Simon was taken aback, and his father replied that to become a necromancer, one needed to be properly prepared at school. "You will have to learn skills, so first we will open your core." Hearing this, Anna was surprised to hear that. "Then wouldn't he have to learn the basics of black magic?" To which Richard replied, "Of course. I will teach him that as well. Oh yes, and he will also have to learn breathing techniques, so from tomorrow, forget about sleeping altogether." After the meeting with Nepos, the hardest week of Simon's life began. That day marked the start of the week of preparing for Kaizen. His mother and father said good things about school life and that he would have fun there. but the sudden invitation to school seemed to worry them both. Preparing for the opening of his son's core, Richard said, "It might hurt, but you have to be patient." To which Simon replied, "Well, 3 days a week, I didn't sleep at all while I was forming the core with the help of my father's magic." After the core formation was completed, his father said, "Now exhale slowly." In the remaining days, Simon learned to breathe and took his father's black magic blitz course. A week later, the boy, who had spent his whole life in Lel, went to Kaizen. Bidding farewell to her son, Lady and barely holding back her tears, said, "Please be careful." Charles, who could not hold back, exclaimed, "Have a safe journey, young sir." While continuing to teach magic, his father, who was riding with him in the carriage, said, "Direct the magical power that is in the space around you into your body and slowly begin to regulate mana. After that, push it through your core, and you can feel the mana getting stronger inside your body." Watching his son study, Richard said, "Now direct its flow into your hands." After releasing it from his fingers, the father was able to see the obvious result of his son's training in the form of a drop of mana on his finger. When the result was already visible to the naked eye, my father confidently said, "Great job, Simon! This is the main power of necromancers. This is the main difference between a necromancer and an ordinary magician. Mana is a kind of gas, which makes it able to dissolve in the air and also reduces its density. But darkness, on the contrary, is more like a solid or liquid body, which is why it is easy to use and change its shape. That's why, if you learn to use this property of darkness." Having created a small figure of his wife in his hand, his father added, "You can create even such a shape." The next moment, having created a magic circle in his hand, the father added, "People who train their power on the basis of darkness, they are the ones who can be called true necromancers. Given that you have quite a bit of time, now let's focus on the main releases of darkness into the core." To which Simon replied, "Well, looking at his attempts to create something out of the darkness, his father saw that he had finally started to make progress, even in such a short period of time." The next moment, when Simon really started to get something right, his father added in astonishment, "I can't believe it." Looking at the tree that his son Richard had just created, he added that it usually takes 6 months to 3 years to learn to create forms from darkness, but Simon was able to reach such an impressive level in just 3 days. Of course, I knew he was talented, but such talent can have its side effects, so I put off building his core, hoping that he would not repeat the mistakes of my youth. But right now, his talent is destined to blossom. Creating a blue flame out of the darkness in his hand, Simon joyfully said to his father, "Look at this." And he replied, "Wow! Midnight blue, that's what it is. Your darkness has a beautiful shade of blue." When Simon heard his father's praise, he asked happily, "Is it good that she has such a color?" "I have a rare case. I'm talented." In response to his son's encouraging questions, the father replied that it was just a beautiful color, which upset the boy. The next moment, the carriage stopped, and the coachman said, "We are here, sir." Hearing this, Simon was surprised to hear that they had already arrived at Kaizen. Hearing the words of his coachman, the father, getting out of the carriage, said, "No, this is the border of the kingdom of Aran. Now I will have to leave you." Hearing his father's words, the son nervously exclaimed, "In what sense, father?" Getting out of the carriage, the boy's father said, "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you earlier, but I can't visit the kingdom of Ariston. It's a long story. From this moment on, think carefully about your next step." Hearing these words from his father, Simon looked out of the carriage and said to his father, trying to reassure his son, Richard said, "Don't worry, son, you'll do better than anyone else. I'm really proud of you." After giving instructions and reassuring his son, the father remained in place to watch the carriage with his son drive off into the distance. 1 week later, in the kingdom of Arisan, after arriving in the town where Simon was supposed to transfer to the ship, the coachman told them that they had arrived. After looking around and seeing how many different people and even skeletons there were, Simon heard that this was the capital of the kingdom of Dresden, Lang Aaron. Having comprehended the beauty and scale of the city, the boy was amazed and said, "Wow, it's so impressive!" Opening a piece of paper with the address written on it, Simon looked around and said, "What a big city. You need to be careful about. Let's look at the taxi. It's 239 Kemmel Road. It says the guide is waiting for me there. I wonder where that is." Deciding to ask for directions from passers-by, Simon turned to the lady in front of him and exclaimed, "Excuse me, ma'am, can I ask you something?" Looking back, the lady with the eye that had fallen out replied, "What can I do for you, dear?" Trying not to show his fright, Simon held out the letter with the address and said, "I wanted to know how to get to this place." Hearing the boy's request, the girl said, "It'll be a minute." "Let me see," she said, stretching her eyes to see what it said. "It's Camel Road," pointing behind the guy's back. The girl said happily, "I saw a big square there. Go to it and turn right. You'll see a street covered with golden tickets. This will be Camel Road. It is one of the landmarks of Langeron." Hearing the information from the girl, the boy sighed nervously, immediately after bowing in gratitude. "Help," Simon said. "Thank you very much," to the lady, to which she happily replied with a fan. "Wow, what a polite boy." Waving goodbye to the young man who had gone in search, the lady happily said, "Good luck, and may he come with you to Langeron." After hearing the woman's wishes of good luck, Simon happily exclaimed, "Thank you, and good luck to you as well." Passing by Simon, who was looking for an address in the capital, a suspicious man approached the same woman and said, "Excuse me, ma'am," taking off his hat to greet her. The man added, "I'd like to ask you something." At the same time, the guide, who was waiting for Simon at the fountain in the square, said nervously, "Why did he take so long? I hope he didn't get lost," having found himself in a pleasant situation where he was attacked by robbers who pointed their guns and shouted, "Now empty your pockets." Simon thought, "I'm sorry, father." He was standing in the middle of a crowd of bandits who surrounded him and told him to give them his bag, his clothes, everything. Simon said in his head, "I might arrive in Kaizen a little later than expected." An hour earlier, when he arrived at the square where the guide was supposed to be, Simon looked around and repeated, 239, 239, over and over again. The next moment, approaching the confused boy, the man took off his hat and said, "You're headed to Camel Road 239. To which Simon replied, "That's right." "You must be my guide from HLE. The man said, "Yes, I'm your guide. I was sent by Hull. You're a little late, so I thought you might be lost and went looking for you." Shaking hands with the man, Simon said happily, "I'm very glad we met. My name is Simon Felina." And the man replied, "Nice to meet you. I'm Rowley, the guide to Langeron. Please follow me, and I will take you to the designated place. I'm very glad you didn't get into trouble before we met. There are a lot of scoundrels in Langeron who like to catch tourists." Leading the boy into one of these streets, which was also quite dark, the man added, "You know, pockets of kidnapping, illegal traders, and all that." To which Simon confidently said, "I know, and so that's why you also decided to make money off me." Hearing these words from the boy, the man froze in his tracks, smiling awkwardly. After Simon's question, the man said, "I don't know what you mean." And Simon replied, "You often look down at the sides. You also often check the contents of your vest's bottom pocket to make sure that an item hasn't accidentally disappeared from there, right? Judging by the shape of the folds on your clothes, you most likely have a dagger or a knife." When he heard the lead from the guy he was taking to the robbery site, the man nervously replied, "Don't get me wrong, it was just for self-defense." After which Simon added, "The name of Hull, isn't that the name of a goat in Lille?" When the man heard this lie identified, he nervously exclaimed that he was a goat. Feeling that his whole body was trembling with nervousness, the man exclaimed in surprise, "So, even knowing that I am not a guide but a bandit, you followed me?" Pulling the knife out of his pocket and waving it in front of him, the man nervously exclaimed, "Who are you anyway?" The next moment, a few dozen more people joined the robber, and then, feeling confident, he said, "But it doesn't matter anymore. Now you will beg us for mercy." Pointing the dagger at Simon, the man said with a sly smile, "Now empty your pockets, your bag, your things. Give them to me." When Simon heard the man's demand, he said, "I refuse to do it." Hearing the boy's words, the bandit standing behind Simon said, "Hey, you hillbilly! You must have misunderstood us." Rushing at Simon with a weapon to teach him a life lesson, the criminal shouted, "We didn't ask your permission." Actually swinging his knife, the man felt that he had missed, and Simon easily avoided the enemy's attack without even lifting an eyebrow. After the enemy's unsuccessful attempt to stab him, Simon grabbed the man's wrist and squeezed it, forcing him to drop his dagger. Squeezing the attacker's hand tightly to demonstrate his strength, the boy said sternly, "I have met many such people in our lands, scum who wander among good people and tear them to pieces. To protect the congregation, my duty as a descendant of a landowner is to eliminate such scoundrels who are engaged in bad deeds." When one of the bandits heard who they attacked, he shouted, "A nobleman! Now we will definitely not let you go." Immediately after his words, the man shouted, "Come out, everyone!" And then there was stomping, the sound of which only increased with time. Looking back to assess the situation, Simon mentally said, "I'm sorry, father. I'll probably have to arrive in Kaizen a little later than planned. The next moment, a woman's voice was heard among the crowd of men saying, I finally found you. I was waiting for you for so long that the terrifying stomp of the girl's heels, as she suddenly appeared in the dark street, attracted more and more attention from the robbers. And that's why I decided that I needed to go in search of you myself, so that it would be faster. When I saw that another strange person had arrived, the leader of the robbers said, Now what? Smiling happily at the boy she was supposed to meet, the conductor said, It seems that you have some business to attend to. Pointing to the girl who had come for Simon. The leader said, Don't worry, we have the advantage in numbers. To which the girl replied in surprise that she did. Using her necromancer magic, the girl confidently added, Do you even know what building is next to you? After calling a few dead people to speak for her, the girl added, A shop that sells skeletons. Come on, my subjects, take them. Seeing that the skeletons were up against them, one of the robbers nervously exclaimed to her, a necromancer. As soon as the subjects entered the battle, the band of robbers immediately lost their advantage and was defeated. Being at a disadvantage against the girl, the leader of the criminals frightenedly exclaimed, We did not recognize the great necromancer. Please have mercy. Hearing the man's request, the girl gave him a disdainful look and asked him, What group were you in? Hearing the question from the necromancer, the man shouted out in fright, Kewin. We are from the Kewin clan. To which the girl replied that the clan was too big for its members to steal from travelers. She commanded him to put his head down on the ground, put his hands behind his back, and crawl face first into the ground to the main headquarters to surrender in person, to which the bandit leader nervously replied, Have mercy! Hearing the bandit's request, the girl angrily said, You dared to order me. Either send someone in his place, or if his face is not too worn, your entire miserable clan will be wiped off the face of the earth in the name of kin. To which the bandit replied, I'm sorry, I'll remember your words. Having dealt with the enemies, the girl looked back to where Simon was standing and said happily, You must be Simon Felina, right? To which he replied, Oh yes, I thank you for your help, but who are you? Hearing the question from the boy, the girl pointed to herself and happily said, Do you think I am your real guide? Grabbing Simon's hand and pulling him along, the girl said, Come on, follow me. My mom has been waiting for us. Arriving in the seaside district, the girl looked for her mother and said, Well, where did she go again? I told her to wait for me here. The next moment, noticing her near the ice cream truck, the girl said, There she is. Approaching Nephis, the girl pointed at her and said menacingly, I told you not to go anywhere. To which she replied frightened, I was just waiting. Taking out a handkerchief to wipe away the ice cream on Neph's cheeks, the girl exclaimed angrily, You always get lost. Stop walking alone. In response to the scolding, Nephis pointed to the van and said that the man there offered free ice cream, to which the girl replied, What if you lost Simon because of that? What would have happened if I had executed you and him as well? Hearing this, Nephis immediately became upset, realizing her mistake. Looking at what was happening in front of him, Simon nervously thought that Nephis was her mother, not her younger sister, and then heard the girl ask, Are you going to apologize? To which Nephis replied, offended. Immediately after, to change the subject, Nephis turned to Simon, saying, Never mind. You must be tired from the road. Simon, I hope Richard taught you something useful? Hearing the witch's question, Simon said, Oh yeah, I learned this. And then created a blue flame of mana in his hand. Seeing it, Nephis said, Wow! It's been a long time since I've seen a shade of blue. Looking at the darkness created by Simon, the girl noticed that it still had the characteristics of mana. It looked like a flame, which meant that it was still in a liquid state. To which Nephis added, Well, for this, you will need to learn to use the core more effectively. He will learn this at school. Great. After demonstrating Simon's skills, Nephis happily said to her daughter, I trust you to guide the new student. I believe in you, my daughter. To which she replied, You always leave the hard work to me. While Nephis continued to enjoy the sweets, exclaiming, Ice cream! The girl approached Simon and said, Well, let me officially introduce myself. My name is Lorraine Erold, and I am a student at Kian, just like you. After the introduction, the girl grabbed the guy's hand and said happily, Now let's go. To which he confusedly exclaimed. Hearing the question from the confused boy, Lorraine happily replied, Of course. Shopping before the start of the new semester. Upon arriving at the first store, Lorraine excitedly asked Simon, Do you know what the best moment of the entire school year was? He replied that he did. Then the girl happily answered, That period of time when you go to buy new notebooks, books, clothes, and other things for school, and this period of time is coming right now. So you better enjoy it while you can to the fullest. First, we'll go to the textbooks. You'll need quite a few of them. Come with me. Following Lorraine, Simon said nervously. Okay. Taking one book from the bookshelf and handing it to the boy, Lorraine said, Take this one first. Looking at the book the girl gave him, Simon was surprised to read that it was An Introduction to Conscription by Ellery Moore Trinell. The next moment, another book with a voiceover by the girl came to the boy's hands, and he took this one as well. Stopping the incessant flow of books, Simon nervously asked the same question. In response to the question, the girl smiled happily and replied, Of course not. It's kin. You learn all these books in the first semester of your first year. Now, don't play the wimp here and get your books. Further in search of the books, Lorraine said, The last one will be a book on the dynamics of darkness. I'll go get it, and you stay here for now. To which Simon replied, looking around while his friend went to get a book. Simon mentally said, Well, what the hell? I had never seen so many people of my age in my life. Suddenly, a girl's voice behind him called out, She's here. Not paying attention to the road, the girl, not looking back, joyfully exclaimed, I'll bring it right away. When Simon saw a girl running toward him, he immediately moved out of her way to prevent her from hitting him, but that did not stop her from crashing into the bookcases, falling on her ass. After the collision, the girl grabbed her face and said, Oh, my nose! While several books from the top shelf fell on her. Seeing that she was in danger, Simon immediately ran to shield the girl with his body from the falling textbooks, shouting, Look out! Having saved the girl from danger, Simon asked her if she was okay, and she nervously replied, Oh, I'm sorry. It's my fault. He confidently replied, I was a little distracted myself. If you're not too busy, could you help me put the books back in their place, or we'll get scolded for this mess? The girl replied, Of course. Helping to put the books back in the places she had safely knocked down. The girl awkwardly said, Are you also a new student of Keen's? When she heard the positive response, she added, Oh, and my name is Cindy Vivas. And yours? Hearing the question from the girl, the guy smiled happily and answered, Simon Felina. To which he was glad to meet Simon. Gripping the book tightly, the girl said embarrassedly, I'm actually from the north, from Shackhead, so I don't have any friends yet. Surprised, Simon said, Then it turns out that we are very similar. I haven't managed to make friends with anyone here yet. Hearing this, the girl's eyes immediately lit up, and she exclaimed, That is true. When the girl got to her feet after the incident, she said uncertainly, Well, if you don't mind. Covering half of her face to hide her embarrassment, Cindy said, Can I say hello to you at school? When Simon heard the request from his new friend, he happily said, Of course. I wanted to ask you about it too. The girl happily exclaimed, Thank you. Having made friends with the new student of the academy, Cindy happily announced, I had already found all the books, so I should go. My dad is waiting for me outside. To which Simon replied, See you at school. By the way, Cindy, wait. When the girl stopped and looked back at Simon's request, he said, You don't want to return my wallet, do you? Plan to take it with you? Realizing that she had been caught red-handed, the girl exclaimed in confusion, I thought that if I used spiritual magic I would not be caught. But as you can guess, recalling exactly how he noticed that his wallet had been grabbed, Simon replied, Well, I saw it just floating in the air. To which the girl exclaimed in confusion. Starting to press her finger on Simon, the girl nervously exclaimed, You just noticed that? Are you mocking me, or do you also want to choose a specialized spiritualism? To which the guy replied confusedly, Well, I haven't decided yet. Looking down after the guy's vague answer, Cindy said, I knew it. The next moment, she looked up at Simon and exclaimed happily, Cass. This place is amazing. I can't believe it. It must be full of geniuses like you. I can't wait to start school. Simon said, Isn't that a lot of goals for a common thief? Jumping up and down on the spot, the girl exclaimed, If we both choose to major in spiritualism, we'll see each other for 3 years. Let's compete when the time comes, Simon. That's so cool. The next moment, after taking the stolen item from the boyfriend, Cindy threw it to the boyfriend and exclaimed, Here. Take your wallet. The next moment, using the magic of teleportation, the girl said goodbye. I can't wait to see you again, and feel free to come up to me at school. Some time after Cindy disappeared from the library, Lorraine came up to the boy and said disappointedly to Simon, They're out of all the copies of Introduction to the Dynamics of Darkness. And by the way, who was that girl? Have you already made friends? To which he awkwardly replied, something like that. Seeing the boy's nervousness when it came to Cindy, Lorraine smiled slightly and said, you don't have to be so shy with me. You can be honest, even if you like someone. Hearing this, Simon thought, yeah, I almost had my wallet stolen. The next moment she added, we're done with the books, and now it's time to deal with the bag. Hearing this, Simon was surprised to hear about the bag. Hearing the confusion in the guy's words as he looked at his bag, the girl said, oh, I don't mean this one. I mean the one used by necromancers. It's called a magical inventory, or simply put, a spatial pocket. Arriving at the store where they could buy a spatial pocket, visitors heard the owner's joyful voice. Welcome, Miss Lorraine. I was told that you had recently ordered a bag, so you must have been looking for one for this gentleman. To which the girl replied, he is new, so I needed a bag with the least restrictions. He doesn't need a model with walls and floors. We necromancers often fight in open spaces. To which the owner replied, Lady Lorraine, you are very perceptive. Taking one of the rings of the spatial pocket from under the counter, the owner handed it to Simon and said, in that case, I will personally show you a prototype that is not yet on sale. First, put the ring on and let the darkness fill it. Then you should feel something like a handle. Hearing the woman's instructions, Simon said, I understand. Having fulfilled all the shopkeeper's orders and achieved the desired state, Simon said, I feel like this. Then she said, now pull the lever. This spatial pocket is the latest development of the leading master, Galen Eclipse. The volume of the pocket is 4,000. The spatial pocket opens on the ground, regardless of the landscape. The space itself consists of 7 magic spells, including first-class protection and climate control spells. Moreover, this bag allows you to activate an invisibility spell to hide your location from enemies. Hearing about the 7 functions of the bag, Lorraine was surprised to hear that the ejection function was present, to which the owner replied, of course, it is also present here. After hearing about all the advantages of the new interdimensional pocket, Lorraine asked Simon if he liked it, and he replied, yes, I do, but it would be very expensive, wouldn't it? Then Lorraine joyfully exclaimed to Stephanie how much it would cost, and she joyfully replied, 5,000 gold. Hearing the price, Simon clutched his heart and thought, that's how many years it took to make Lash Hill's annual budget. Hearing the price, Lorraine approached the cash register and said, we'll take it. While Simon, who had just learned that she was buying it, nervously thought, are you serious? Immediately after buying the storage facility, Lorraine confidently said, not to worry, it's Mom's money. To which Simon was surprised to hear that it was Nephis. Then Lorraine replied, I don't know the details, but my mom owes your parents a lot of money, so she's just paying it back. Don't say no. To which Simon nervously replied, it's still a big gift. How can I repay Nephis? Hearing the boy's question, Lorraine said, offended, I don't even think about it. If you want to thank your mom, just study hard at Case Western. To which Simon confidently replied, I'll do my best. When Lorraine was done shopping, she left the store and said, thank you and goodbye. Once in the Sea Capital Square, she confidently said, now you have everything, let's have fun. To which Simon replied in surprise, what can I do? And she confidently replied, of course. This is part of our plan for today. After which the guy added uncertainly, okay. Arriving at the shooting tent, the girl bought a ticket to participate and handed the crossbow to Simon, saying, go ahead and knock out the plush toy. To which he replied, I'll try. After one attraction, they went for a walk and found themselves on a bridge, from which Lorraine pointed to one place and said, there is the highest point of the city, and this is a must-see attraction for tourists called the Thousand Lights. As you might imagine, Simon shrugged looking at the flashlight he threw into the sky and said, I'm only thinking about whether there are 1,000, out there who spend 200 silver pieces on burning paper. Marveling at the general appearance of the lanterns in the sky, Simon said, wow. To which Lorraine replied, you'll fit in perfectly in Kaizen. Then Simon said, thank you very much. Then the girl said sternly, it wasn't a compliment. But the boy added confusedly, okay. After launching the lanterns, Lorraine went with Simon to the seashore to a restaurant. When she saw the way he ate, she exclaimed in surprise, you know etiquette. You really are an aristocrat, aren't you? When Simon heard the girl's question, he said awkwardly, my father didn't calm down until he taught me the proper behavior at the table. Hearing this, Lorraine replied, you learned well. By the way, I'll tell you right away that 30% of Kaizen students are commoners, So don't even think about telling others what to do just because you're a nobleman. We have a meritocracy in Kaizen. To which Simon replied, I'll remember that. Then the girl added, tomorrow is the first day at the academy. Do you have any questions? Yes, that girl in the bookstore. She told me that I would need to choose a specialty and then mentioned her words in response. To which Lorraine told the faculty that this was a good question. In the first semester, you will study 9 subjects, 7 core and 2 additional subjects. In the second semester, you will be able to choose the ones you like and refuse those that do not interest you. In your second year, you will have to choose a major for yourself. Which Simon asked? Just like that girl? So I'll have to figure out which subject I have the most aptitude for? Lorraine said, I recommend that you find a few favorite subjects and concentrate on them. In Simon's imagination, it looked like everyone would come running to him and ask him to join them, and then he said, I'll definitely remember that. The next moment, Lorraine added, Have you thought about your major? To which the boy replied, I think I like the theory of conscription. What you showed me this afternoon was just amazing. When he heard what Simon was interested in, Lorraine answered that the theory of callings was a very good subject. It was quite a classic magic among the faculty of CIN. I don't know if you'll believe me or not, but it's Professor Hung Pang. To which the boy exclaimed in surprise, That him? Then the girl added, I can't even believe it myself from time to time. And there are professors among them. Simon interrupted the girl and said, I've been dreaming of seeing her. The girl added, Great. Let's get to the island. Stopping at a place near the hotel, the girl said, If Mom finds out that you came to class tired because of walking with me, she will beat me to death. Hearing that, it was time to say goodbye. The guy happily said, Thank you for everything. Which was quite interesting, to which Lorraine replied, Oh, come on. Trying to express all his impressions of the day, Simon happily said, I will remember this day for the rest of my life. To which the girl replied that it was really nice to hear. I'll be going then. She hadn't gone far when she suddenly looked back and said, By the way, Simon, I have something else I need to tell you. To which he replied in surprise, Yes, what is it? Then the girl said happily, Well, I wasn't going to deceive you. I wish I'd told you about it right away. Smacking herself on the head and smiling sweetly. Lorraine added, Well, I'm new too. Having put the guy in a state of shock, the girl pointed at him with her hands and said happily, Let's be friends. See you at school. Now bye. The next day, when he arrived at the pier and saw the other applicants leaving for the island, Simon was surprised to hear that everyone was so stylish. It seems that I'm the only one who looks ordinary here, he thought, hearing the announcement from the ship. Passengers come to the loading dock. We are leaving for the island of Kian. The boy thought. Lorraine said she would arrive on the island by another way, so we will now meet only at the academy. But why did they moor so strangely? As they usually moor with their noses toward the sea. After which Simon felt he had heard the documents in the normal way. Just as he was about to go on the deck of the ship, he heard a menacing shout from nearby. I'm telling you, it's a mistake. On another boarding line, one of the boys grabbed the conductor and shouted angrily. I'm the first on the waiting list, and you want to tell me that there is not a single student who refuses to study? So that's how you do things in __. Clenching his hand into a fist, the guy added, Contact the Kaizen administration. There's definitely some kind of mistake here. After seeing this performance, one of the applicants sighed heavily and said that every year there are always those who cannot accept the result, and he is also the first on the waiting list, so you can understand his despair. Pointing at himself, the bully angrily exclaimed, I am Lucius Carroll of the Earl of Arend. Contact the administration, I order you. To which he was answered, Please leave this place, you are not on the passenger list. The next moment, unable to contain his anger, Lucius Carroll grabbed the guide by the hair and pulled him toward him, exclaiming, How dare you! Intervening in the conflict and stopping the hand of the guy who was about to hit the ship's worker, Simon said, Stop it! Then the ruffian turned his gaze to the one who had prevented him from committing his massacre and angrily exclaimed, Who the hell are you? Let me go! Hearing the boy's threat, Simon only tightened his grip on the bully's arm and then saw him kneel down in pain and shout out angrily, You probably want to play the box. Earlier, when a voice asked from behind them what was going on, the next moment an old man descended from the ship, and upon seeing him, everyone exclaimed in surprise that it was Professor Silage. After inspecting the area and noticing who was causing the disturbances, the professor looked at Lucius menacingly and said the last words of the will. When a more important person came out to him, Lucius exclaimed, Please don't laugh. I'm just asking you to contact Nephis. I'm first on the waiting list. This result is a misunderstanding. Unable to bear the guy's impudence, the professor heard him exclaim, "You think you can treat me like this?" and snapped his fingers, instantly killing the guy without letting him finish. After dealing with the problem and heading back to the ship, Silage said, "We don't have time for this. Everyone on the ship, and you too." To which Simon replied, "Well." Having witnessed the murder of the boy, a crowd of onlookers said in surprise that it was the black magic of blood and that they would have lessons with him in the first year. Noticing that Simon was very nervous after what had just happened to the boy, the professor straightened his hat and said, "Don't worry, he's still breathing." When everyone was loaded onto the ship, Professor Silage spoke to the students. "I would like to ask everyone here to take their seats. The ship may go through turbulence, so do not leave your seats until you are ordered to do so." Sitting down in an empty seat in the cabin, Simon wondered how this ship sails. As long as the transport was enveloped in the magic of movement, the boy continued his thoughts, stern forward or otherwise. The next moment, all the students heard the voice of the sailor. "Professor, we will soon be there." To which he replied, "Stick to the route." When all the preparations were completed, the ship began to slowly rise and make a splash around it, and the students nervously exclaimed, "What is that wave noise? But isn't it too much noise for ordinary waves?" After which a giant wave rose behind the ship. A few seconds later, a giant whale emerged from that wave and flew straight toward their ship, jumping out of the water and swallowing the ship. The masters of necromancy and Kaizen have their own underwater servant, and this same servant is a dead whale who submits to the academy in order to bring students to the island. Realizing what had just happened to them, one of the students nervously said, "We're in the belly of a whale." To which the other replied, "I think so. This monster roams the ocean waters and will swallow any ship that necromancers point out to it. However, once a year, it fulfills its mission, namely delivering new students to the port of Kaizen. This is exactly what the Kaizen Academy's high-speed ship is after." Leaving the ship, one of the students was surprised to say that it was quite nice here, except for the fact that we are now in the stomach of a whale, and it seems that people live here. Also, after leaving the deck with all the students, Simon suddenly heard a boy address him, saying, "You didn't miss a beat." As soon as he paid attention to him, the boy added, "Despite the conflict situation, you tried to calm him down with words." Simon replied awkwardly, "Nothing special." After expressing his impressions, the boy shook hands with Simon and said, "I'm also applying to Kaizen. My name is Rowan." To which he replied, "Nice to meet you. I'm Simon Felina." Having met his new friend, Rowan asked, "By the way, how did you pass the entrance exam?" Simon asked confusedly, "What kind of exam?" In response to Simon's question, Rowan answered, "The introductory. I gave my form to the darkness." Hearing this, the guy was nervous, thinking, "I had no exam. Nepus just came and stuck me a letter about my enrollment. But if I tell him this, he will be offended that I was hired on a whim." Then he nervously said, "I also took the same exam with the same darkness." To which Rowan replied, "What a coincidence." The next moment, the loudspeakers announced that the students were asked to board and take their seats. Soon, hearing this, Simon was surprised to hear that Rowan answered, "Himes, the speed is incredible." When everyone took their seats and boarding began, the ship's management announced, "Dear students, we are entering a turbulence zone, so please remain seated. Do not stand up for your own safety, rather hold on to the railing on the ship and get ready for a shake." Having survived all the adventures on the way to Kaizen, the professor, after stopping the ship and opening the exit door, announced, "We have arrived on the island." When everyone left the ship and headed for the island, 2 giant guards met the students at the entrance and told them to line up in 4 lines, as we were about to hand out uniforms. "So everyone who has received a uniform, please continue to the men's locker room to the right, women's locker room to the left. You all have 5 minutes to change, after which we ask you to leave without delay." After changing his everyday clothes to the Kaizen uniform, Simon looked at his appearance and thought happily. His father was right. It was a very stylish uniform, and he would not be ashamed to wear it to the ball. After changing into his uniform and leaving the locker room, Simon walked down the hall and heard the jacket enchanted by the Academy's uniform, which was good for magical combat and stronger than armor. Then the voice of the staff said, "Come on out, let's go on," moving to the common room where the girls were also present. Simon saw the fairer sex and thought to himself, the girls' uniforms look much more beautiful. The next moment, the staff's voice was heard again. "Well, everyone's here, so let's go to the auditorium." As he was getting ready to go to the classroom, he suddenly heard Simon behind him saying, "What are you doing?" He was surprised to hear Rowan say that. Immediately after stretching his arms up, the guy happily exclaimed, "Simon, I can't believe we're really in Kaizen. This is definitely not a dream." To which he replied, "Don't worry, it's not a dream. Oh, by the way, Rowan, what about all these students? Are they new?" Hearing the question from his colleague, Rowan confidently answered, "Of course. There are 1,000 students in the first year alone." To which Simon was surprised to hear that there were 1,000. Continuing the story, Rowan added, "And by the way, in the second year, there will be about 300, and in the third year, less than 150. To which Simon exclaimed in surprise, trying to tell his friend more about this place. Rowan added, "That out of 1,000 enrolled students, only 30% will continue to study in the second year, so this is the kind of atrocious selection that's going on here." "Oh, that's right. By the way, that's not all. There are also students you need to know about in advance." Pointing to a girl who was sitting not far from them, Rowan said, "There's Suna Ar, the heiress to the ivory tower." After pointing to a couple of other people, he added, "Some more rising stars, Darwin Carine over there, and Jay Sanders behind him." The next moment, pointing at a healthy guy sitting in front of them, Simon asked, "Who was that?" Rowan replied that he was the one he was talking about. Realizing who his interlocutor was interested in, Rowan added, "A large yes. I know him, Chatelmayer, half-giant. Probably he will go to the specialty of combat magic. And on this side there's a girl, she's just the best in our stream." Simon turned his gaze to the one pointed out by his friend and asked in surprise, "The best?" Pointing to a girl nearby, Rowan said, "Lorraine Arkal. Thought she would be admitted on special terms because she was the only daughter of Nephis, but I heard she passed the entrance exams and got the highest marks. It did not even take second place among those tested, but everyone already knows that it is the best." The next moment, a representative of the academy appeared on the stage and said, "Attention students! We will now begin the enrollment ceremony. Congratulations to all the students enrolled here. You should soon become the pride of Kian. In conclusion, we expect the best results from you, and you 7 are strictly forbidden to go to the forest. Now we'll introduce you to the faculty." After the teachers appeared on stage, someone from the audience exclaimed, "Wow, they're all top-class active necromancers." Unable to contain his emotions, Rowan joyfully exclaimed, "I've only seen them all in the newspapers until now." While greeting fans among the newly arrived students, one of the teachers heard, "Professor Buckle, look at me." Looking around the faculty, Simon said in surprise, "I don't understand why Nephthys isn't here." Hearing the question from Comrade Rowan, our rector answered him, "Our rector does not come to ceremonies for some freshmen. If you see her in the third year, you are lucky." Immediately after the staff spoke, the representatives now swore an oath for everyone to stand up. Upon hearing this, Simon asked if the ceremony was over. When he heard the question from his friend, Rowan confidently answered, "The 2 best representatives from the girls and boys come out and say the oath, and then that's it." After announcing that the first of the girls is Suna Andar, the staff went on to name the number 1 student who was accepted under special conditions, Simon Fenna. "Simon Fenna is here." As Simon walked to the podium to take the oath, the rest of the students were talking in surprise, looking at him and saying, "Who doesn't know him? I've never heard of him, this number 1 guy." Seeing the nervous look on the boy's face, Suna Andar said, "Don't worry, just read it out loud," to which he replied, "Well." After receiving the letter with the oath, a couple of the best students said that they swore that they would enter the academy. After the oath was pronounced, Simon took his seat and nervously thought that Kian was a really serious academy. "I did not expect that we would start 14 classes for 1,000 students on the same day, and that each classroom would be completely full." Trying to somehow calm down as he listened to the words behind him, "This guy is accepted on special terms. Never heard of him, never heard of him. What family? He seems to be from Felina," Simon nervously thought. "They are talking about me. It's only the first lesson, and I'm already on pins and needles, so I need to calm down. Let's see how many more lessons we have today. Oh, we're going to have a draft theory today, which means it's the same magic that my father has mastered perfectly." Remembering his father in the moment when skeletons were called up to help the workers, Simon mentally added, "If I study hard, I will become like my father." When the first lesson began, the teacher entered the classroom and took his seat. For some people, necromancy is associated with some strange figures wearing dark cloaks and digging up graves under the cover of night. However, this is all in the past. Modern necromancers are smart, stylish, pragmatic, and in step with the times, and these are the necromancers of the new generation. Bahil Amgar, a professor of curse theory for the first year, is a young professor of necromancy. At the age of 27, he has already joined the Raven Squad, the main squad of Kaizen martial artists, and all the students simply adore him. Taking off his jacket for convenience, the teacher said, "Good afternoon, students. I will be your first curse theory teacher. My name is Bahil Amagar, so let's take a roll call. This is a great opportunity for all of us to get to know each other, so as I call your name, introduce yourself to the class. So let's start with Jamie Victoria," and when she heard her name, she immediately jumped up and down and exclaimed, "I'm so glad to meet you, Professor. I would like to go to school as a curse maker like you." Bakel interrupted the girl, "But wait, don't introduce yourself to me. Start with your classmates." Hearing the teacher's remarks, the girl awkwardly said, "Oh well, I'm Jamie Victoria," and at this rate, the turn came to our protagonist, who rose from his seat and said, "My name is Simon Felina. I'm from Lille." After which voices in the audience said, "I found the one who was accepted on special terms." At the same pace, many students introduced themselves, and the turn came to another guy, Hector Moore, who stood up from his seat. When the class presentation was over, the professor rolled up his shirt sleeves and said, "You are all just incredible. So, let's get started with our lesson. From the very beginning, we will ask ourselves the fundamental question of why we need, writing on the board the question they would be discussing." Bill added that they needed a theory of curses at all. "Who will tell me what a curse is?" Hearing the question, Jamie's hand immediately raised, and he exclaimed, "Jim's curse is a type of dark magic that allows you to feed off the strength of an opponent, while weakening him." To which the teacher answered, "Just fine, Jamie." The next moment, raising his finger in front of him to focus the student's attention, Bahil said, "I don't think all the students can imagine this, especially when it comes to weakening." The opponent went up to the board and started to draw an example to explain. The teacher said, "I'll give you an example now." Having finished the drawing on the board, he pointed to one of the fighters and said, "We have two knights with the same skills and level, and so they begin their fierce battle, exhausting each other. One of them waits for the moment when the other makes a mistake. About 20 strikes have already been made on both sides, but neither side wants to give in. It was at that moment that one of the knights looked at his opponent with bloodshot eyes and shouted a curse. Hearing the curse from the opponent who had just cast it on him, one of the knights shuddered and turned pale. Finally, when the opportunity presented itself, the sword pierced his shoulder. After that, the first blood was shed in the fight, and the opponent's movements became less and less accurate. Continuing to actively draw an adaptation of the example of the curse, Bakel added a knight grasping for a chance to win. He continued his attack until his opponent was cornered and stabbed him in the leg. After that, he grabbed a handful of sand and threw it in his eyes, striking the opponent's helmet flat to stun him. Then the battle took on a completely new, desperate character. Finally, the moment of climax in the fight arrived. The knight chopped off his opponent's head, and it fell rapidly to the ground. After completing the story with a detailed customization of all his words, the professor asked, "So, now you understand that even a barbaric sword fight?" Having attracted the attention of all the students with an interesting presentation of information, the professor said that there is a series of actions that are hidden to exhaust the enemy and gain the upper hand. Taking the chalk in his hands again to explain everything in detail, Bakil said, "I will show you how the battle of modern necromancers takes place." Having drawn a model of an ordinary person from sticks in a circle on the board, he pointed to them and said that, in order to defeat a person, a necromancer needs to defeat a person. He added one more line to indicate the direction of the attack and then made just one simple movement, after which he easily defeated his opponent, followed by enthusiastic shouts from the audience. As he continued to practice at the blackboard, Bill said, "A curse is the simplest and most inexpensive formula among the dark arts, and another key to its effectiveness. In addition, an indicator of effectiveness is how much you can hit the enemy with only a small amount of effort." Immediately after these words, the professor approached one of his students who was sitting in the front desk. Taking him by surprise, the teacher Beal created a magic circle that cast a curse. Using a curse on one of his students, he managed to knock him unconscious and then reached for his weapon, holding out a dagger from his bag. The teacher smiled ominously and said, "This is how modern necromancers fight." After an incredible show of necromancer skills, the professor bowed, and the audience shouted, "Incredible, Professor! The theory of curses is the best." At the end of the enchanting show, the teacher snapped his fingers and said, "I don't know what specialty you will choose, but I can assume that more than 80% of you will choose my subject in the second semester." Meanwhile, a happy Simon, who saw the beauty of curses, heard that the theory of curses goes well with other types of magic. "I always approve of my students choosing a subject that is closer to their hearts and cursing their enemies at every opportunity." Turning back to the blackboard and picking up the chalk, the professor said, "There is no shorter path to victory than this. I believe that the theory of curses is the heart of modern necromancy, and the reason for this is that the priest of the curse theory is a must-have science for those who want to confront our natural enemies. The next moment, turning to face the audience, Professor Bakil spoke and told them what would happen if necromancers had the art of cursing with them and the priests had their divine power of blessing. However, the difference is that a curse takes away strength, while a blessing restores it. So, it is restored. Who can explain to me what is the advantage of curses over blessings? As soon as the question was asked, a hand was raised in the audience, and a girl shouted out, "Jamie Victoria!" A curse is much faster to cast than a blessing, and that is why the cumulative effect of many casts will produce results faster. But fortunately, she was wrong. When she heard that she had made a mistake, the girl immediately became quiet and froze in place, not receiving an answer to her question. Bakil said, "Scholars agree that the curse cast is slowed down by the object's resistance to magic, and that is why it is faster by a small percentage than the speed of the blessing cast." Well then, who else might know the answer to my question? Then I saw another hand in the audience rising from his seat. The disciple said, "Hector Moore! The fragility of the human body helps the one who curses." After hearing the answer that satisfied him, the teacher said, "What's your name again?" To which Hector Moore replied, "I'll remember it." After receiving a satisfactory answer from the student, Professor Amgar said, "Hector is correct in saying that spells that weaken the opponent cannot be repelled by the added art. All people learn magic in their normal state, not even realizing that they may be sick or injured at the time of battle. The mage's well-being also affects his effectiveness in battle. If the environment does not negatively affect him, then these are ideal battle circumstances. However, the human body is much more fragile than we can imagine, and even a small change for the worse can weaken it. Well, let's say that your opponent is an archer. You don't have to cut off his arm to neutralize him. You can simply give him conjunctivitis, which will make it difficult for him to see, and it will also make him nauseous, affecting his sense of distance, so that he stops distinguishing it. You can also make him distracted by something else. With all these various actions, you can avoid being hit by his arrow. The main thing I want to tell you is that necromancers have many different ways to make their opponent feel worse. For example, if you are very tired and have a stomach ache, you will not come to my class, and that is because you are simply not in a position to learn. Of course, you will most likely just lie in your room all day long. Remember, leaving the chalk and approaching the students again, the professor added that we should think about ways to weaken others more than ways to make ourselves stronger. The next moment, assistants entered the classroom with cash register kits, and then the teacher said, "Now, when the curse casting kit is given to each student," Bill Amgar said, "we will learn how to cast curses." When Simon heard what they were going to be doing, he thought, "Wow, from the very first lesson we are learning dark magic." The next moment, the professor remarked that it should be a disgrace for Kian's students to use a spell stencil, but this was the first lesson, so they would have to. It is good to use the stencil from the very beginning to memorize the magic circle, but I do not advise you to abuse it. You must rely on memory when casting. Let's start with a spell of exhaustion. Everyone, grab the handles of your stencils and pour your darkness into the mold. The key to a successful drawing of a magic circle is the perfect correctness of the runic writing. Runes are an alphabet with magical properties. Drawing runes with the help of your own darkness leads to the manifestation of their magical effects. If any of you have already created a magic circle, try to lift it into the air. When Simon heard this, he filled the stencil with darkness and raised the magic circle, exclaiming, "I did it!" Immediately afterward, he heard voices around him exclaiming, "Oh, me too!" When Simon heard this, he was surprised to hear that so many people had succeeded. After a few seconds, the professor walked among the students and said, "I see that some of you have lost your magic circles. Don't worry, this happens when you have not cleared your darkness or the binding force has weakened. Try again, and for those who already know how to hold a magic circle in the air, I'd like to ask you to try using a spell. Look carefully at your set of magic. Each of you has been given a house plant." As he continued to drift around the room, reviewing the progress of his students, Bahil said, "Look at him and apply the curse. If, as a result, you get a visible negative effect on the plant, it means that everything worked properly." Turning his attention to Simon again after Hector Moore, the teacher added, "I see that the difference in your abilities is enormous. When you have succeeded in the spell, try again. Only this time, increase the speed. When the speed is sufficient for you, then try to draw a circle without a stencil." At the same time, failing time and time again, Simon bowed his head and nervously wondered, "What is wrong with me?" Looking at how others were already practicing the rapid use of curses, he mentally added, "Why am I the only one who is so slow?" What am I doing wrong that I'm not succeeding? What a misfortune! As he reflected on his mistakes, Simon suddenly remembered the words of Lorraine, who had said, "Looking at his flame, but its darkness is like manna. It radiates tongues like flames because it is still half gaseous." After which, Nephis added, "Well, it's okay. He'll learn how to control the core. He'll learn everything at the academy, so that's fine." Recalling the words of his friends, the boy confidently said in his head, "That's right. I haven't learned how to control mana and darkness yet. Nephis and Lorraine said so. To achieve the result, I have to start with the basics. Professor Bahil said that the problem is either the purity of the darkness or the power of the binding, so I will try to concentrate as much mana as possible from the environment first, and then send it all to the Khalil at once. Now it's darkness, and now it's much more stable then. Well, now create and cast a spell before the magic circle breaks down." The next moment, the boy used a magic circle and finally managed to exhaust the plant with a curse, after which a pop sounded, and the teacher said, "That's it." Breathing out a sigh of relief that he had made it to the end, Simon said, "If anyone else didn't make it, you can practice his homework, and the rest of the time we have left, we will devote to using the curse on living people." Simon said in confusion, looking through the list of students in his journal. The teacher said happily, "I see that we have student number 1 who is enrolled on special terms." Simon Felina walked up to the board, feeling the stares and voices of his classmates saying, "This is the one special. Wow. Must be from a really gifted." Simon nervously said, "Well," continuing to look for more interesting students in his journal. Bakel added, "Who could be a worthy rival for such a brilliant student? Now I will look among the students with the highest scores in the final exam." Having called Hector more against him, the professor said, "So, these are the rules. I allow only one exhaustion spell to be cast. Create a circle for this spell and cast it on enemies. The first one to kneel or hit the ground is the loser." When both participants received their magic kits, Hector said, "Professor, I'm going to make a magic circle without a stencil." Hearing these words from his student, the teacher smiled happily and said, "Well, that's a good mood." At the same time, Simon was not laughing at all, looking at his opponent and thinking that this big guy looked quite smart despite his bear-like appearance. The teacher, who announced the duel, recalled his words. "Actually, for Kian students, using a stencil should be a disgrace, but this is the first lesson, so it will have to be." After mentioning this, he smiled slightly and added, "I pointed out that it was shameful to use a stencil." And he immediately decided to show that he was better than the others. The next moment, he turned his gaze to another student and said, "Oh, Simon," to which he replied, "I'm going to make a magic circle with a stencil." Hearing this, the teacher announced, "Well, if you wish, then you can start by my sign, and good luck to both of you." When Simon heard that the competition had started, he nervously thought about filling the stencil with darkness. "Don't be nervous, do what you did a few minutes ago. You can do it again." But suddenly he felt some kind of weakness in his body and blurred eyes, and then he said, "This can't be." Seeing the first step already made, Hector exclaimed, "Well done, Hector! How fast and without a stencil." Then Simon thought, "I've already made it. I already feel very tired from my spell, and I already understood what the professor was talking about. But I'm almost ready. I just need to get the circle in the air." As Simon continued to try to perform the spell, he saw that his magic circle had collapsed, and thought it would not work, even if the caster tried again. Watching Hector move perfectly, Jimia Victoria nervously told him to go away for the 5th spell, asking, "And why was he called number 1 when he couldn't even do one spell?" Continuing to hold on to his legs with the last of his strength, Simon heard the words, "You look miserable." Preparing to strike the 6th blow with the spell of exhaustion. Hector said, "You really want me to finish the job?" Hector is definitely a nugget, not only talented but also behaving like a true adept of necromancy. Kaysen will be an excellent student and will definitely make it to the 3rd year, and this one, who was admitted on special terms, has neither theoretical training in the dark arts nor any experience in resisting magic. Watching Simon closely, Bakil added that he was curious why Nitas chose him. This year, only 4 students were admitted without a difficult entrance exam, and only the talent of the century is admitted on such conditions, especially those who are called number 1 among them. Usually it was a personal choice of Nephthys, and such a student eventually grew into a rather large person.